You can have your standards, but you have to accept the consequences of holding to those standards and refusing to compromise. I meant to read and react to this article when it originally came out in March, but I didn't get around to it for whatever reason, and now other people are starting to talk about it. The Quarter Ring did a bit on it. Tim Pool did a video on it that I'm going to watch after I record this because I want to give my take uncontaminated by other people's opinions. I'm talking about this Wall Street Journal article titled American Women Are Giving Up on Marriage by Rachel Wolf. Again, came out back in March of this year. And you gotta admit, that's a pretty clever visual. So before we find out why exactly American women are giving up on marriage when objectively they have the better deal because they actually benefit from the divorce, comparatively speaking. Because we all know that divorce and family courts are biased against men. But before we figure out why they're walking away from what's a pretty good deal for them, be sure to give this video a like. Comment your thoughts on this, whether you've given up on marriage, man or woman. And subscribe for daily videos. Alright, let's get started. After a handful of underwhelming relationships and dozens of disappointing first dates, Andrea Vorlasek recently called off the search for a husband. The 29-year-old always thought she'd have found her life partner by now. Instead, she's house hunting solo and considering having kids on her own. I'm financially self-sufficient enough to do these things myself, said Vorlasek, a Boston-based accountant. I'm willing to accept being single versus settling for someone who isn't the right fit. She sees her plans for an independent future as making the best of a lousy situation. I don't want to sit here and say I'm 100% happy, Vorlasek said, but I feel happier just accepting my reality. It's mentally and emotionally a sense of peace. So women are being told to protect their peace, like the MGTOW guys have been saying. All right. American women have never been this resigned to staying single. They are responding to major demographic shifts, including huge and growing gender gaps in economic and educational attainment, eh, political affiliation, and beliefs about what a family should look like. The numbers aren't netting out, said Daniel Cox, director of the Surveys Center at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. He ticked off the data points. More women than men are attending college, buying houses, and focusing on their friendships and careers over dating and marriage. Yeah, I guess those are the facts. I guess the question is why. Well, a lot of men aren't attending college because, admittedly, a decent number of professors do give them a hard time for being a man. There is a certain level of original sin. I'm not going to act like that doesn't exist. But at the same time, they're finding alternative paths, or some like me are warning younger ones that it's really not worth it unless you know exactly what you want to do and you do it in something that's actually useful, that'll actually pay well. As for buying houses, I guess they're getting it for a status symbol, even though, quite frankly, it depends on how big or small space is. There's the meme of men really think it's okay to live like this, with the lawn chair and the TV in the empty room. And yeah, to an extent, that's actually kind of true. I sleep on two mattresses on stacked on top of each other, mostly because I want to make sure I have enough room for the door to my room to open, and so that I can set up my Yogi Bone Max so that I can sit down and watch TV or play video games. Yeah, the meme is actually quite based in truth. And yeah, I'm I as a man, I am focusing on friendships and this hustle over dating and marriage, though we'll see what happens if and when I get around to that speed dating investigation that I keep on talking about. Like George R. Martin said about the White Walkers and the pizza.
Don't worry, they're coming.
Getting back to the article, I guess the next one they're going to be talking about is in this picture. Center left. Frenchie made it a singles mixer last year. Yeah, center left. Okay, there she is. Getting back to the article, stories of women complaining about the lack of quality men have long infused pop culture. From Pride and Prejudice to Taylor Swift's Au revoir. Yet women throughout history rarely questioned whether finding and securing a romantic partner should be a primary goal of adulthood. I always say, and I'm going to say it again, nice little bonus if it happens, not the end of the world if it doesn't. This seems to be changing. Over half of single women said they believed they were happier than their married counterparts in a 2024 AEI survey of 5,837 adults. Just over a third of surveyed single men said the same thing. Huh, I wonder why. Could it be that half of single women have been conditioned to believe the girl boss propaganda, while that one third of men, or hold on, my bad, the two-thirds of men who said they were less happy than their married counterparts, they probably fall for the societal shaming of calling them an inkwell or a chud if they aren't married with kids. That's what they are saying. That's what I assume they're being told. Well, it's not what I'm saying. Frankly, I think if you are married, good for you. If you're not, hey, it's not the end of the world. If anything, you're actually avoiding a lot of responsibilities and liabilities in a good way. Just like Lester Burnham.
I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility.
Back to the article. A 2022 Pew survey of single adults showed only 34% of single women were looking for romance, compared with 54% of single men, down from 38% and 61% in 2019. Men were also more likely than women to say they were worried that nobody would want to date them. Well, I guess this proves my video about men being the real romantics being true. Not to mention, it shows that this is exactly why dating apps are unbalanced. There are always more men on them than women. And the fact that it declined like that in 3 years, I am curious to see how low that can go. Well, I guess I'm among the No, I can't come up with a preference. I mean, a percentage right now because there's a because that's almost 3 years old now. Anyway, back to the article. A rise in earning power and a decline in the social stigma for being single has allowed more women to be choosy. They would rather be alone than with a man who holds them back, Cox said. For young women especially who tout their boy sober and off the market status on TikTok and other social media, the focus has shifted towards self improvement, friendship, and the ability to find happiness on their own. Surveys show a decline in teenage relationships, and Gen Z is having less sex than previous generations, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Yeah, I know that the Freedom Tunes guy said it was based of Gen Z until Tim Pool pointed out that's why there's a declining birth rate. Honestly, I think if they're just being a little more selective these days, knowing about STDs and knowing that there's a increased risk the more you F around. Like seriously, that is if you get one, that's literally effing around and finding out. I mean, just look at Percy and No Hard Feelings. He wanted to actually get to know Maddie instead of just doing the deed so that she could get the car from his parents, and he made a lot harder for he made a lot harder than you would think for that kind of situation. Like, in past generations, if No Hard Feelings took place in 1993 instead of 2023, let's just say Maddie would have a much easier time getting that car. Though, I guess if it took place in 1993, it wouldn't really work because, well, they said in the article Gen Z is having way less sex. Crisis of connection. The share of women aged 18 to 40 who are single, neither married nor cohabitating with a partner, was 51.4% in 2023, according to analysis of census data by the Aspen Economic Strategy Group, up from 41.8% in 2000. These numbers don't specify whether women are looking for love or swearing it off, but more nuanced surveys show that single women appear less interested in getting married now than they used to be. They also seem to be less keen on getting hitched than their male peers. Wow, I would have thought it would be the other way around with the truth about divorce courts and all of that being bias against men getting put out there. In a 2023 Pew Research Center survey of 5,073 U.S. adults, 48% of women said that being married was not too or not at all important for a fulfilling life, compared with 39% of men, up from 31% and 28% in 2019. In 2024, a Wall Street Journal slash Nork poll, 58% of women aged 18 to 29 said marriage was at least somewhat essential to their vision of the American dream, compared with 66% of men. Do men not know about the divorce courts? Okay, 18 to 29. Maybe some of them are still a little, I don't want to say blue pilled, but for lack of a better term, unaware. They haven't seen the information yet. They probably still buy into the mainstream narratives. Marriage rates for both men and women are in decline, in part owing to less pressure to pair off and higher expectations for a would-be match. Dating apps make people feel like there might always be a better option, said Melissa Kearney, an economist at the University of Maryland. They view looking for a marriage partner the same way that you view looking for a job candidate. Well, I'm just going to say this straight up. You should have standards for a spouse. You should have some be with someone who you can actually see yourself spending the rest of your life with, and there are some things that you should not compromise on. As I said in another video, how you would go about raising your kids is definitely something you need to be on the same page of for a successful marriage so that you aren't left arguing over whether to send the kids to private school, public school, or home school. You should either both be on the same page about that and commit to that, or you shouldn't get married in the first place. But some men, but men seem more satisfied with their options than women. A 2023 AEI survey of college-educated women found that half blamed their singlehood largely on an inability to find someone who meets their expectations. Less than a quarter of single men said the same. I'm going to level with you. Men have pretty low expectations when it comes to a girlfriend or a wife, comparatively speaking, for women with a boyfriend slash husband. So, most men are just going to go for looks and such. I'm not talking about the looks from the hot girl hamster wheel, as I talked about in the video about why women spend so much on that. They don't care as much about something like education level, income, or such on a larger scale compared to how the women feel about the men. It just is. I am just telling you what I've heard from others. I think it's okay to have some kind of standards for that. And I believe you have the right to look for what you want, but you have to accept the consequences that you might not find what you want because it could be a needle in a haystack. Like, take me for example. I cannot find anyone who doesn't drink. Therefore, I accept the consequence that I am not going to go on any dates anytime soon, if ever. Because I would rather be alone than compromise on that. I would rather be alone than put up with a potential romantic partner who drinks alcohol. Literally, that's my thing. And I'm willing to never compromise on that, and I'm also willing to accept the consequences. See, that's the thing we need to realize. We have to either compromise or not compromise and then accept the consequences of not compromising. Like, you're free to have your standards. You should have standards. You should be strict about what you're willing to put up with to a certain extent. But you also have to live with the consequences. Okay, excuse me. I've gone on about that enough. To get back to the article, to the extent that some women are staying single because this is what they want, that's great, said Kearney. But we have to take seriously the likelihood that many are doing it as a plan B because they're not finding what they're looking for, and that should make us concerned. Yeah, it's probably a plan B for a lot of people because they're probably still conditioned that you have to get married at some point. They're probably still conditioned that it's what's the word, the phrase that the Not the Bee article said? Come on, I have it bookmarked here. All right, I'm gonna try and pull it up. I believe they said it was the expectation and not an option. Yeah. Okay, I can't bring it up right now, but if I recall that Not the Bee article correctly, back in the author's grandparents' parents' day, having kids was the expectation, not just an option. Whereas today, it's viewed as an option and not the expectation. Which personally, I am okay with. I am all for letting it be an option. Sure, there are good things about it. If you are having if you are looking to have kids, it's definitely a more stable option. But at the same time, I do not believe everyone should be just corralled into getting married and having kids because, let's face it, not everyone is exactly qualified for it. When I say that, I mean in terms of they would not give them the full time and attention that they deserve, and they would not be able to make the personal sacrifices necessary. Therefore, I think it is for the better that only those who truly want to do that are the ones doing it, and the ones who don't want to do it should be left to the fuck alone. Boyfriends by Christmas. Last year, Michelle Kirsch told her 3 adult daughters she wanted them to have boyfriends by Christmas. She had a dream, she had told them, that each of them was going to stand in front of the lit up tree next to a hunk who liked to ski and went to a good school. This dream went unfulfilled, admitted Katie Kirsch, who is 30 and runs Loom, a leadership coaching startup out of New York City. Maybe we're doing it wrong. I'm guessing Katie Kirsch must be one of the daughters. I'm curious, didn't say. Did not all 3 of them have boyfriends by Christmas, or was it only one of them, or did none of them have boyfriends by Christmas? Well, let's continue. Oh, there's Katie Kirsch right there. All right, it looks like they're gonna talk about the story behind it. Katie spent much of the Katie spent the first half of 2024 going on 3 or 4 dates a week with men she met on apps such as Hinge and Bumble, in the hopes of finding a husband before turning 30. By the end of the year, she had ramped down the search, calling it the only thing you can put 10,000 hours into and end up right where you started. That's a reference to the whole put in 10,000 hours into something and you become an expert. Yeah, I can definitely see that happening, especially if you have stringent standards. I should know. I have very stringent standards, and I refuse to compromise on that one thing I mentioned earlier. Let's get back to the article. Many of the men Katie met, she said, either seemed turned off by her ambition or weren't career oriented enough for her. Excuse me. She felt discouraged by just how many of her male friends similarly said they expect their future wives to prioritize their families over their jobs. Their choice, their burden to bear if they aren't willing to compromise or whatever. Yet, Katie's luck may be changing. She recently started dating a man she was set up with who seems both interested in starting a family and supportive of her career. She admitted she was wary at first. I thought it was too good to be true. The challenges of finding a romantic partner have been made more complicated by a growing divide in education and career prospects between men and women. In 2024, in 2020, in 2024, 47% of American women aged 25 to 34 had a bachelor's degree, according to Pew, compared with 37% of men. A bachelor's degree increases net lifetime earnings by an estimated $1 million, according to a 24 report from Georgetown University. Assuming you actually go into the career field you studied for, and assuming that it's actually something that pays in the first place. Yes, I'm starting to wonder, okay, maybe there is some precedent to that, but precedent is clearly collapsing. We live in unprecedented times. I'm just going to leave it at that. And there's the chart showing from the last 30 years. Women have been on a straight growth prospect for that, whereas men climbed up in 2010, not as fast, and then still growing, but not as fast. There's right around where I would be as the. Or is this just the. No, I would fall into around here because that's when I was in that age group. So I guess I'm among the 37%. Women are doing comparatively well when it comes to education in their early years in the labor force, and men are doing comparatively badly, said Brad Wilcox, a fellow at the Conservative Institute for Family Studies and a sociology professor at the University of Virginia. That creates a mismatch because people prefer to date in terms of comparable education or income. They're not wrong, you know? I think people want to be able to have a similar understanding. Again, most men do not care about degrees the way that women do. They might think, oh, cool, but it's not really the priority compared to whether they think she's physically attractive or not. That's what Better Bachelor keeps saying. Put it this way, he always says that most guys would happily date a female Taco Bell cashier if she was good looking, while most women would not date the male Taco Bell cashier. I'll just leave it at that. Men's economic struggles seem to be having the biggest effect on women without a college degree, whose marriage rates by age 45 have plummeted from 79% to 52% for those born between 1930 and 1980, according to research by Cornell University economist Benjamin Goldman. Young men without a degree are struggling so much as a group that there simply aren't enough with steady jobs and earnings for non-college women to date, said Goldman. For Christina Ralston, a 31-year-old wildland firefighter in rural Republic, Washington, who didn't go to college, buying a house was confirmation she didn't need a partner to be content. She paid $90,000 for a two-bedroom on half an acre of land in 2022. I'll have it paid off in the next 2 years so I don't feel like I need to be tied financially to somebody, Ralston said. After her last relationship ended in 2023, when she discovered he was still on Tinder, she doubted she would find someone else who aligned with her progressive views in her conservative town. So she stopped looking. If I need companionship, I volunteer at the dog shelter. It sounds like she's taking my advice to either compromise or not compromise and then accept the fact that you will be single if you don't. Because at a certain point, you have to accept that you're either going to have to change your standards or accept that no one will meet them. I mean, in her case, she could easily just. She lives in Washington. She could literally just go to Seattle where she can find all the liberal men that she wants if that's really what she values. They have fire departments in Seattle. I'm sure she could just transfer there. Maybe. I don't know. Don't quote me on that because I don't know what I'm talking about. Single people in large cities where home prices have surged in recent years are finding that their marital status has hampered their finances. Although the wealth gap between single men and women appears to be shrinking, real estate prices have helped drive a near doubling of the wealth gap between singles and couples from 2010 to 2022. Yeah, that's because couples, quite simply, they have more money than one person could bring in this day and age. 70 years ago, it would have all been one income because not as many women were in the workforce. Today, literally everyone with a pulse who's an adult is expected to be in the workforce, even though workforce participation is roughly half of people, according to one of the videos I did earlier. Look, I do a lot of videos, so I'm just going to say that in this case, the fact that more women are in the workforce compared to the 50s, it does make sense that the economics would change. To be clear, I am not saying that women in the workforce drove down wages because more people in the workforce in general means less competition for getting individual workers. But I am saying that if two people have if two people join their incomes together, it is a lot higher than a single person because wages have been stagnant. Getting back to the article, married couples had $393,000 in median wealth in 2022, according to the St. Louis Federal Reserve, while unmarried people, including those who were partnered but not married, had $80,000. Economists say married couples are more likely to have assets such as homes and cars, which have grown in value faster than wages in recent years. Yeah, because combined they have more money. They also probably have more of a reason to buy a house, which is to start having kids. They're also probably they probably need all that stuff a little more, whereas yes, you do need a housing. Yes, you do need a car or the ability to call an Uber to get anywhere in America in 2025. Damn car dependent infrastructure. But yeah, it looks like it's not the fault of women joining the workforce and saturating the market. It's more about the fact that the assets have gone up in price while wages stayed stagnant, and now both of them have to, both members of a couple have to work to be able to afford something like a house or car or cars, plural. Well, a single person would be able to afford a car of some kind. Andrew Tate was right that with inflation, only rich people benefit because they have the physical assets, the prices of which actually go up because of inflation, so they're all set. Whereas we, the brokies, we're negatively hit by inflation because our buying power diminishes because the value of a single dollar diminishes. Different world views. Oh, finally, we're talking about Alicia Jones from earlier. For Alicia Jones, not having anyone else to financially depend upon or split rent with is the worst part of being single. Especially with the threat of layoffs, it's much more stressful being a single person, said Jones, who is 38 and works in communications for a real estate company in Washington, D.C. Her last long term relationship ended 2 years ago over conflicting views of their shared future. He wanted the white picket fence and me at home with the kids, Jones said. This despite the fact that her salary was nearly 50% higher than his. What did I say? You can have your standards, but you have to accept the consequences of that. And this goes both ways, whether you're Alicia's former partner here, who wanted the white picket fence and the wife at home with the kids, or you're Alicia and you want to, I don't know exactly, does she want to be a girl boss? Does she want to be a working mom? I don't know. I should probably keep reading the article to figure that out. Jones, who identifies as politically moderate, thinks couples with kids should split household and child care responsibilities equally. She was surprised by just how few of the men she has encountered in DC share this view. Either they held traditional ideas about marriage or were extremely crunchy liberal and wanted to live in a van and drive across the country. Hey, like Rice Iphans in Venom 3. Oh, wait, none of you have probably seen Venom 3. But yeah, that's exactly what she just described. Basically, that's the thing about being a fence sitter is you're only going to find either the extremes of the other sides. Now, by the sound of it, what I'm trying to decide is whether she would approve of my parents' arrangement from when me and my siblings were kids. Because they basically split childcare responsibilities with, again, my dad being home in the morning and then my mom coming home from work in the afternoon around lunchtime, and then they traded places. Like, honestly, I have no problem with this as long as no one's keeping a scorecard. That's something I actually completely agree with Matt Walsh on. Say what you will about his dumb takes, like anime being satanic or Sonic the Hedgehog 3 not even being a movie. He is right that you shouldn't keep score in something like a marriage. You should just do things like that because you care. Like if you don't usually do the laundry, maybe do it every now and then, or again, keeping track of micromanaging a score like that, not a good idea according to him, and frankly, I agree with him. Before she pulled back from dating last year, Jones tried her luck at singles event. Well, a singles event. She left with three numbers, all belonging to women who became friends, whom she now meets for drinks or dinner multiple times a month. The men at the event, the four women agreed, seemed more interested in the brewery's board games than the people in the room, so they spent the night getting to know one another instead. Wow, I'm surprised it wasn't because the women outnumbered the men at this thing, like I've been hearing so many others do, and I'm suspecting that the skip the small talk ones that I've been investigating into with Boston are not experiencing this because every time I've looked at the tickets the day of, the man's tickets were sold out, the women's ones weren't. I'm just going to leave it at that. A growing political divide between men and women has compounded the challenges of finding love. Around 39% of women 18 to 29 identified as liberal in 2024, according to Gallup, compared with 25% of their male peers. This gap has more than tripled in a decade. 32% of women and 28% of men called themselves liberal in 2014. And here you can see the shifts. You have women become more liberal. Huh. Looks like it got less liberal over the course of the 2020s. Maybe it'll balance out. I don't know. And then here are the men. There's a spike here in 2020. Maybe these two declines here explain why not as many people voted for Kamala compared to how many of them voted for Biden. Because I know that 2020 Biden got what, 80 million votes compared to Kamala's 72 million, something along those lines. And then here are the conservative side. kind of shifts up here in the mid 2000s, declines here, and then kind of spikes up right before the 2008 election, before declining and rising up in the early 2010s. Now, this is wildly unstable. You can see more women than men have always been more liberal than conservative, and vice versa. Men have always been conservative compared to the number of women, though at some point in 2005, 6, by the looks of it, there was actually some level of it was almost equal. And then after Obama came in, yep, that's where the split really occurred, though. Interesting that conserv the number of 18 to 29-year-old women who were considered conservative increased. Does that just mean that you think these shifts might have been because the 29-year-olds aged out of it, or do you think it's something else? Let me know in the comments down below, because I'm starting to wonder if maybe the more conservative ones simply aged out. No, not just those. Both sides. I'm wondering if the 28 to 29-year-olds just aged out, and that's why there are sharp spikes in both directions. These differences aren't merely about preferences or votes, according to University of Denver psychology professor Galena Rhodes, who researches romantic relationships. Rather, politics have become an expression of one's core values about everything from economic inequality to bodily autonomy. They are reflective of people's worldviews, said Rhodes. That's actually, unfortunately, very true. Back when I was in college, there was this whole mantra about the personal is the political. And that's when the tail end of the ethics class I took, got into got into the feminist ethics, and then re-examined everything from the other ones with the feminist lens. I remember something personal is the political. And yeah, politics do affect people's lives to a extent. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. Really, it's more of the local positions you should worry about than who the president is. Yes, the president can enact changes, sign executive orders, and redirect agencies to do XYZ. Yes, the federal Congress can pass laws that affect how we can do things. But really, that's like longer term and such. On the local level, that's what you should really be worried about. The latest presidential election and the first months of the Trump administration have intensified this ideological rift. Rachel Gozzetti, a 33-year-old real estate agent in Savannah, Georgia, said she broke up with her boyfriend, with whom she shares a 5-year-old son, over a year ago because she was tired of doing most of the childcare, cooking, and scheduling while also earning almost double her boyfriend's salary. She has yet to date anyone else, in part because she worries about living in a red state with a 6-week abortion ban. I have a child that I can't leave behind, to drive to Virginia if I had a pregnancy scare, and I definitely can't afford another child as a single mom, she said. Others are intentionally heading into motherhood solo. Um, couldn't you just leave that kid with his dad? I mean, it sounds like the two of you never married. I don't know how the custody split works if they were never married. Tina Newhy, who is 34 and works for a health startup, still hopes that one day she'll be swept off her feet. But she says she has spent much of the past year trying to talk herself out of her fantasies of a romantic, happy ending, realizing she was rushing into relationships out of fear of running out her biological clock, and that her favorite part of dating had become debriefing with her friends the next day. She decided to separate her desire to find a partner from a desire to become a mom. Newhy, who splits her time between New York City and San Diego, has lately spent hours researching the single mothers by choice movement and started saving for a baby with a high yield savings account. Parenthood and romantic love don't have to be intrinsically linked, she said. The only hurdle, getting her traditional family on board. At first, they tried to convince me that I still had plenty of time to find somebody, said Newhy, but they seem to have come around. And that's the end of the article. Oh, okay, that was a long one, but what do I have to say? Maybe Tim Pool's wrong that women with the biological clocks won't eventually. Well, his thing is that the liberal women will eventually move conservative with the men after a while because the younger men who are apparently more conservative now are going to be like, no, I don't think I will, when asked if they would date the women in question, because, as he pointed out, they do not have a biological clock to worry about. They have a borderline infinite amount of time to have kids, whereas biological kids, that is, whereas women are restricted by the biological clock that does exist. Yes, it's still technically possible to have a child as late as your late 30s, but other people have said those are the egg cells that lead to a lot of health issues for the kid in question compared to the higher quality eggs of the early to mid 20s. That's what they all said, not me. Although, frankly, between you and me, just adopt if you're feeling that strongly about it. Or you're just going to have to accept, or better yet, take a page out of the Passport Bros' book. Go somewhere that'll actually be beneficial to you, you know? I'm pretty sure that, what's her name? I'm sure Rachel Gossetti could move to Virginia if she felt so strongly that Virginia is a better place for her compared to Georgia. Like, at a certain point, you have to either accept your situation or do something to change it. You don't like that Georgia has the 6-week abortion ban? Move up to Virginia so that you don't have to drive or worry about the things you're worried about. And I would say the same thing to someone who feels strong, someone on the opposite side of the aisle who would say, I don't like that Virginia is this lax with abortion. Well then, you can just move to Georgia. So, I'm just going to leave it here for the video because I think I've made my point. Women are walking away from marriage because so many reasons, not to mention, which I'm actually surprised by because I always thought it was the men who were walking away because of the divorce courts. That's definitely a real thing. That's definitely a legitimate concern to have. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. You can have your standards, but you have to accept the consequences of holding to those standards and refusing to compromise. I speak from experience as someone who refuses to date a woman who drinks, smokes, or does drugs, and I accept the consequences of that I will be perpetually single, and I'm at peace with that. You be sure to give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos, comment what you think about all this, whether you're a man who agrees with this, or if you're a woman who agrees with this, or if you think otherwise, either way, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.